Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, and I welcome you to the course on the cell signaling, sometime also offered under the heading of the cellular signaling. Now, this particular course is for the undergraduate as well as the postgraduate students, and in this particular course, the first video will be on the introduction to the cell signaling, like what is cell signaling. Then I'll be focusing on the application of the cell signaling, or on the importance of the subject of the cellular signaling or the cell signaling. Then the most important question, like why living organisms need a signaling system. I'll have a little bit discussion on that as well. We will be focusing on the types of the cell signaling that you see in the living organisms. Then the ligand and the receptors, which are actually the backbone of the signaling, because any pathway, any cellular signaling pathway that you study, that will include a ligand and a receptor. Therefore, I call this as the backbone of the signaling mechanisms. Then I'll be talking about the matting of the haploid yeast cells, and this will be an example from the unicellular world, just to give you an emphasis that the cellular signaling is not only important in the multicellular, but it is also very important in the unicellular world. I'll be talking about the kinases and the different types of the kinases, because these kinases are the most important proteins that you will see in different signaling pathways. I'll also be focusing on the fibroblast growth factor and the platelet derived growth factors along with their receptors, and these will be examples from the paracrine signaling, and they follow the most important signaling pathway, which is known as the MAPK signaling pathway. We will also be having discussion on the non-receptor tyrosine kinase mediated cell signaling, and to understand this particular concept, I'll be using the SRC and its signaling pathway as an example, just to give you an understanding how the non-receptor tyrosine kinase mediated cell signaling work. We will also be having discussion on the serine threonine kinase mediated cell signaling, and under the serine threonine kinase mediated cell signaling, I'll be focusing on the receptor serine threonine kinases, the famous protein kinase A pathway, also known as the cyclic AMP dependent protein kinase. And this protein kinase A is very important for the fight or the flight response in the mammals. I'll also be focusing on the protein kinase C, which is also known as the calcium dependent protein kinases, because these serine threonine kinases, they are the largest of the family of the kinases. Therefore, I'll be using these three as an example, just to give you the importance of these pathways in individual, as well as to give you the importance of the serine threonine kinases as well. Then we'll be focusing on the karyopherins, which are actually a group of proteins which are involved in transporting molecules between the cytoplasm and the nucleus of a eukaryotic cell, because you all know that the proteins that are made in the cytoplasm of the cell of a eukaryotic cell, but they need to be transported into the nucleus of the cell. Sometimes you need the reverse of it. You need to transfer the proteins or the RNA from the nucleus into the cytoplasm of the cell. So we'll be having a detailed discussion on the karyopherin, how this particular phenomena is achieved. Then we'll be talking about the neuronal signaling, and in the neuronal signaling, I'll be talking about the structure of the neurons, the types of the neurons, the action potential, which simply means how the message travel in an axon of a neuron, and last we will be focusing on the release of the neurotransmitter at the end of the axon in the synaptic cleft. The last topic that will conclude this particular course, that will be the cell cycle or the cell division cycle, which is actually a series of events that take place in the cell that cause it to divide into two daughter cells. Under the cell cycle or the cell division cycle, we'll be focusing on the machinery of the cell cycle, which include the spindle apparatus, the microtubules, the kinetochores, the centrosomes. The spindle apparatus is actually composed of these three major things. Then we'll be talking about the cell cycle control system, which will include the cyclin dependent kinases, also known as the cell division kinases. For short, they are known as the CDKs. The second important component of the control system, they are the cyclins, and the last important component is known as the ubiquitin proteasome system. And this ubiquitin proteasome system is a highly regulated destruction machinery for the proteins. Understanding the cell cycle is very important to understand the cancer, because in cancer the control system of the cell cycle that actually fails, and when that fails, that actually leads to the uncontrolled cell division. So these are the topics that we are going to see in this particular course. So I welcome again you to this particular course, and I hope you will get a lot of things.